Hello, I am Xarkun, and this is World of Warships Legends. Today, I've got a first impressions review of the new Tier 6 Premium Pan-European Destroyer Orkan. We're going to look at my mod selection on the ship, the commander build, and take a brief look at the consumables because they are significant before we jump into some gameplay, talk about the stats of the ship and how it plays. And the gameplay is something a little bit different than I usually do. But first, mod selection, aiming systems, propulsion, and concealment. Commander, Swirsky, the only commander available right now at the time of this video for these pan-European destroyers. Bay and Sims are his inspirations. Now the consumables, the Orkan is the only, or the first, at least right now, destroyer in the game to come with radar. 9-kilometer range on the radar, 15-second duration. So it's sort of got the range of American radar on cruisers and the duration of Russian radar on cruisers. For the game though, we're going to be on Crash Zone, Domination, and let's get right into it. The Orkan has 17,260 hit points, and of course keep in mind William Sims is influencing that number. It's got a little bit less than that at base, but with Sims on there, it's a respectable amount of hit points for a Tier 6 destroyer. And the gun characteristics. This is where I should mention that the Orkan is basically a Tier 7 Lightning. That is the Tech Tree British destroyer. It's basically a Lightning that has been down-tiered. The smoke has been removed. It's been given an engine boost and also a radar. So the gun characteristics and many of the other stats on the ship are a lot like the Lightning. 6 120mm guns in 3x2 turrets, 10.9 kilometer range, 4.6 second reload, 1750 max HE shell damage, 9% fire chance, and 2250 max AP shell damage. That's almost exactly the same as the Lightning. The only differences are the reload is a fraction of a second faster on the Orkan, at least with this build I'm running. And both the high explosive and armor piercing on the Orkan, for whatever reason, do 50 more damage than the same shells on the Lightning. Oh, and for what it's worth, the Orkan does have one very meme-worthy secondary. By the way, you can see another Orkan out there. We just counter-radared each other. Has a very meme-worthy secondary. It's one single gun, 102 millimeters, with a 5.2 kilometer range that does 1,500 maximum HE shell damage, although you're not going to find that it pens a whole lot of things. The Orkan also has torpedoes, not at all like Lightning torpedoes, only 4 of them in one quadruple launcher. The space for the other launcher that you would find on the Lightning is taken up by that ridiculous secondary gun. The 4 torpedoes reload in 70 seconds, so that's fairly quick. But they only do 10,700 maximum damage, which I'm pretty sure is the... Actually, no, it's not the lowest amount of damage for any destroyer at the tier. You've got the Venom and the Sims, which both do less damage. But the Lightning, the Orkan is right above them on that list. Everything else does more damage with its torpedoes than the Orkan. And 10,700, keep in mind, if one of those hits a battleship, it's not going to do full damage because of the torpedo reduction on battleships. You'll be looking at more like 5, 6k, maybe even 4k, depending on how good the torpedo damage reduction is. Actually, probably not 4k. 5 or 6 would probably be in the right ballpark. 9-kilometer range on the torpedoes, which is fairly good, and 65 knot speed, which is actually pretty good, quite respectable. The speed of the ship itself, 36 knots in the water, 590 meter turning circle, 3.4 second rudder shift. Basically the exact same stats as the Lightning. And then the concealment on the build that I'm running, 5.1 kilometer detectability. Quite stealthy. Now, the Orkan. Well, as you saw earlier in the match, the enemy Orkan was able to radar me, and I was able to counter radar that Orkan. Suppose that the enemy destroyer is literally anything else, and essentially what you have is a very effective destroyer locator and often a very effective destroyer killer in the Orkan. So you've got the option to use Twist and Track on Swirsky, which I recommend you do. That's going to point at the direction of the nearest ship, and that information is very valuable. For example, you can see that the Twist and Track indicator is, I don't think it's quite pointing at that Nagato. Maybe it is. Nope, it's definitely pointing at the enemy Orkan. I was going to say it didn't appear to quite be pointing at the Nagato. And the Nagato, 8 point whatever kilometers away from us, we know it wasn't pointing at him. He was the closest ship visually to us, though, which means there was a ship closer to us, the enemy destroyer, which means if we popped our radar, we would have known that the enemy destroyer was in range, because that Nagato, which appeared to be the closest ship to us, but actually wasn't, according to the information we got from the Twist and Track indicator, allowed us to figure out that there was a destroyer in radar range. So, Twist and Track, very valuable for knowing if a destroyer is in radar range. If you're outside of a cap circle, the cap circle is turning red, you don't see what's in it. You can also pop the radar. Basically, you have stealth radar. Although, you have to know quite a bit about the game, I suppose, in order to be able to employ it effectively from stealth. In the explanation I just gave you, while it was a little wordy, also probably pretty dense in terms of just knowledge of the game. This is not a new player-friendly ship. If you've just picked up the game today, do not buy this ship. You'll have absolutely no success in it. And if you are an experienced player, well, it's difficult to get the most out of this ship. Because the radar, that's great. Basically, from what I've described, and I guess a bit of what I've shown you, if you have experience in destroyers, you should be able to imagine a lot of situations in which the radar on this ship could be very useful, potentially even game-changing, and it definitely can be. And then, of course, the gun characteristics, a lot like the Lightning. Now, the Lightning is a pretty good gunboat when it comes to dueling with other destroyers, and the Orkan is basically the same. It has a pretty nice meaty alpha strike on the high explosive, so if you're trading with enemy destroyers in close-up knife fights, it's likely that you're going to probably have the higher alpha strike, unless maybe the destroyer is French, say. And you do have a pretty quick reload. Not as quick as some destroyers, but quick enough. So you can outmatch some destroyers in close-up knife fights. Others are going to outmatch you. It's sort of the same story in the Lightning. So it can definitely be a destroyer killer, and it can certainly be a destroyer locator with the radar. Also, if you've got smoked-up cruisers, you can get a little bit of revenge. Say you got a Belfast 7 kilometers away, he doesn't know you're there, maybe he's already popped his radar, he decides to smoke up, boom, you radar him, and you reveal him inside of his smoke, give him a taste of the medicine that he may have forced you to swallow while you were playing against him in a destroyer. So, the radar is basically the highlight of this ship, the main gimmick. The downsides, though. The guns are fine. They're basically lightning guns, and those can be very good for starting fires and shooting at battleships, racking up damage that way. You're seeing a little bit of this here. The problem is the Lightning has a smoke screen, actually 6 of them that don't last very long, but it can deploy it, hide inside the smoke screen, and just kind of do hit and run action basically the smoke screen increases its survivability a lot, gives it a way to disengage. The Orkan does not have that, so you have to choose your engagements very quickly, because the only way you can disengage is by running away. And of course the Orkan isn't all that fast, 36 knot top speed. It does have an engine boost that can probably get it up to 38, 39 knots, but still, there are some cruisers that can outrun it. So you do have to be very careful positioning this destroyer, because you can die easily. And then the torpedoes, only 4 of them. Incredibly difficult to land them on target. You can see I've only got 1 torpedo hit in this game. Incredibly difficult to land them on target. And they do have a quick reload, but that just sort of doesn't really make up for the lack of torpedoes. And maybe I'm overstating it by saying incredibly difficult, but difficult enough. And then even when you do hit, there are only 4 torpedoes. You're probably not going to hit all 4, and they don't do a whole lot of damage. In fact, I don't even think they have the Alpha Strike to dev strike any battleship that you're going to encounter. They probably don't even have the Alpha Strike to dev strike some cruisers you may encounter. However, that doesn't mean the ship isn't capable of putting out the damage. Obviously, we died in that previous game, and for all intents and purposes, it's over, but I'm glad I watched till the end, because something shocking happens. Anyway, cut to here, where I ignore my position on the map. I'm fighting a Z-23 and a Vladivostok, and obviously I've missed the Z-23 with my torpedoes. I should be able to out-DPM him. He's got big guns. They have good Alpha Strike, but they're very slow reloading. My guns also have good Alpha Strike, and they reload a lot quicker. Torpedoes are a bit of a concern, but you can see that the Orkan is able to go toe-to-toe with something like a Z-23 and trade with it effectively until it can kill it. Now for the Vladivostok, though. This is where the, power of the torpedoes is really going to come into stark relief. Obviously, we're not going to survive this encounter. We have no way of disengaging. This is the end of the game for us. So all we can try to do is damage this Vladivostok as much as possible. So torpedoes out. By the way, you can fire them tube by tube, just like in British ships. All 4 torpedoes hit, not anywhere near enough to completely kill the Vladivostok. The only silver lining is that I'm pretty sure he has, at this point in the game, for whatever reason, exhausted all of his damage control consumables, because he does not put this flood out. The damage is going to continue to rack up. Unfortunately, it's not going to kill him. And actually, by the time the damage is done ticking, I think this right here, from this little clip, is the highest damage game I've had in the Orkan. It's very difficult to pump out the damage in this thing. You have to be a very, very good destroyer player to do a lot of damage in it. And I'm sure there are some players like that out there. I'm obviously not one. So what to make of this ship? It's a very difficult premium ship to play, and I would not recommend buying it unless you are a very, very good destroyer player who sort of specializes in destroyers, a destroyer main, say, because it does have interesting tools available to it, like the radar, and the fact that it has no way to disengage and is basically a smokeless lightning for all intents and purposes with radar and a mediocre engine boost, well, if you've played the Lightning, I'm sure you can imagine what that would be like. It requires you to think quite a bit. So, very difficult premium ship to play, and definitely not newbie friendly. Anyway, back to the original game for this video because I want to show you this. It's somehow down to 2 versus 2 with less than 2 minutes to go. The friendly Atago is just about to take out this Siegfried, and that means it is 2 versus 1. So we've got a Bismarck versus a Mogami. And I don't know if you noticed, because I didn't point it out when this last part of the clip started, but the Bismarck has been firing high explosive at the Mogami this entire time, which is baffling to me, because this Bismarck is clearly not a potato. Look at him. He's dodging torpedoes. He's got 3 kills. He's survived this long. He was supporting me earlier in the game against the enemy ships out on this flank. So he's not a potato. He's not new. I don't know what he is doing. In fact, I'm on the microphone telling him nicely, like, dude, you're clearly not a potato. It's clear you know what you're doing. You're dodging the torpedoes. You helped me out. We were together. You survived this whole time. You've got 2 kills or whatever. Why are you shooting HE at this Mogami? Look how many hit points he has left. Look at the clock. 38 seconds. He's still firing high explosive. But the Atago is now in range, and his shells are starting to go for the Mogami. How are we going to win this? There's no way this Bismarck can take out this Mogami, right? There's no way. This Mogami is going to survive. 15 seconds left. This Bismarck literally has 1 more salvo. This is the last salvo he can fire. Mogami on 5,000-ish hit points. The HE does hit him hard enough, and the fire that the Bismarck started burns him down at literally the last second. We win. I just thought that was an insane ending to a game. Maybe not the most appropriate video to talk about it in, but I felt like I had to point it out. Anyway, final thoughts on the Orkan. Very difficult ship to play, and just evaluate your own skills with a destroyer before you decide to pick this thing up, because it's not easy. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Goodbye.